I'm Wayne Hepler, and this is Feedback. Isn't it true that we're surrounded by creatures and events in nature that we know so little about? Maybe a meteor shower we find out about after the meteor shower. Or there's so much light pollution around us, even in Harford County, we really can't even see what we're missing. Today we've got two people who can address that problem and a lot more with an organization that's been around for 7 years and has just won a landmark award. Most people build a deck in a backyard or go stargazing, and it's not particularly news. But on Feedback today, it really is, and there are some interesting things to talk about beyond that as we regroup with the Susquehannock Wildlife Society. And one of the co-founders and a very good sidekick join us today at Feedback. And welcome to both of you, gentlemen. Thanks for coming.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Got Scott McDaniel, the executive director, who gets the part-time gig. With a lot of volunteers, as we're going to find out. He's also the creative media director and a co-founder. Actually got a degree in electronic media and film, yoo-hoo, at Towson University, where many of my students end up going. And good to have you here. And with us also Andy Adams, who is the president. Got his professor of biology gig going here at Hartford Community College. That's what he does in real life. After getting his master's from Central Connecticut State in ecology. And nice to have you as well. So here we are talking about a platform being built up in northern Hartford County, as well as you guys getting a very nice award we want to talk about. What's going on with this birding and scenic overlook up in northern Hartford County, Scott?
From the very first moment we walked this property where we're building a wildlife center up in Darlington, we hiked this really steep hill. We're all out of breath, and we stopped at the top of the hill to catch our breath, and we looked around, and we had this great view of the Deer Creek Valley, looking towards the Susquehanna River. And we said, we really should build something up here, a place we can gather and kind of teach and rest after, losing our breath. And
there's plenty of property up there to do it, right?
Exactly. So we have 20 acres, and this particular spot lets us look over our meadow area. It's a good wildlife viewing spot for birds, raptors flying above. We've seen a golden eagle up there, and falcons and hawks and eagles, bald eagles as well. And butterflies and all sorts of things. So we thought, hey, this is a great spot to stop.
And where is this exactly, Scott?
The Susquehannock Wildlife Center is off Trap Church Road. It's not open to the public yet. We're under construction, but we do open for small events to get people introduced to the property and so they can see what we're working on. And we do have some outdoor elements already completed, thanks to some Eagle Scout projects and other hard work of our volunteers. We've been slowly finishing small projects and engaging the public to come out and look around.
So before people snooze and say, so it's a deck in northern Hartford County. Thanks a lot, Wayne. Good show you got there. When I step outside in more central Hartford County, I've got light pollution, even though Hartford County isn't a big city, obviously. And I really have some beautiful nights where I see lots of things going on out there, but I know I'm missing a lot too. Is this part of the point, Andy?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people don't realize really what they can't see until you get really far away from all those lights. And I mean, just in the past couple of years, we've seen a lot of people gain interest in looking up at the stars, especially with the eclipse we had last year and all the meteor showers. People are realizing they have to go somewhere to actually get a good view of these things. And this is what makes this location really special, in that it's out in the middle of the field. You get a clear view of the sky, little to no lights around. You can see 360 almost all throughout the sky. And really, you won't be able to miss anything, any astrological events going on.
So I come, and maybe Scott's there, maybe Andy's there. You have lots of volunteers who work for Susquehannock. What's going to happen for me if I say, yeah, okay, I think I'll venture up?
We'll have an event where we'll take you on a hike. We'll have a campfire going in the winter. We try to give people hot chocolate and coffee and hot cider.
S'mores?
S'mores, of course.
All right.
Can't not have s'mores.
I'm there.
We listen to coyotes and owls calling at night many times. We educate about wildlife in the area. We also talk about the agricultural significance of Hartford County. This property that we have was once a farm. So we kind of talk about how farmers in the area can work with wildlife and how we're still keeping the characteristics of a farm alive on this property, as well as restoring things like our meadow, which a meadow is a very rare kind of habitat. It's usually, either developed or turned into a farm or trees are planted. So an actual open meadow is very rare, and it's very important for wildlife. So that's kind of the importance of this platform, is that it gets you up to look around and see from a high vantage point, which is actually also rare You don't usually get on top of a hill and be able to see because there's trees all around. But since it's cleared out as a meadow, you can actually see, and you get a vantage point that is more uncommon than most people are used to.
And Andy, I know, at least speaking for myself, but I know there are others, certainly. There are times you might be outside and you're not listening, or you're really not looking and observing, but there's something going on. How many times have there been shooting stars right over your head, you didn't catch it? Or there's a sound being made by a coyote. You're used to it. You don't even think about it. I get the feeling this is the kind of thing you get there. If you just put yourself there, if you take the minute to go up there, and you guys are saying, ooh, do you hear that? Oh, did you see that over there? Right? That's going to become the fun of the evening.
Absolutely. In all of our events, whether we're hiking on the property or off the property, I mean, we really emphasize making a connection with your surroundings and nature. And part of that is to be completely silent. And because, like you said, there's always something going on. There's some noise or something moving, right? If you really pay attention. And the more you learn and the more you go to these events, the more you know what to look out for. And we seem to see something new almost every time we do something like that. So,
that's fun.
Yeah.
We're talking with Scott McDaniel, who's the executive director of the Susquehannock Wildlife Society, and the president, Andy Adams, who's also a professor of biology at Hartford Community College. Now, while we're looking up and talking about things in the sky here, we're dating ourselves as we do this interview, but the end of January is going to be a blue moon. Some people know what that is, second moon in a month. So we've had one early in 2018, and there's another one coming right up. But you guys were also telling me it's exciting stuff like a super blue blood moon. So we're going to get a great big red thing hanging around the horizon. Is that what that adds up to, Scott?
It is. So we've got a lot of these kind of names that have been coined, and it works really well for the media, I guess. But it is. It's an interesting combination of things. The moon will look a lot larger than normal. It'll also stand out in its color. It'll be brighter, almost a reddish color. And, you hear once in a blue moon, that means it's just a rare event that happens twice in the same month. So it's a really cool event that a lot of people will miss out on. They'll shuffle out of their cars or go into their house. They won't even look up at the sky, and there's this really cool thing going on. So those are the types of things that we want to highlight on this platform. We are a wildlife group, but we want people to be engaged in nature and to break away from their phones and their computers and their houses once in a while and get outside and get some fresh air and look up and just marvel at these things like we did with the eclipse last year. It got a lot of people outside and looking at something that most people don't even think about. Take the sun for granted. It's pretty interesting, and we feel the same way about wildlife, too. You take it for granted.
Before we look up too far and don't look down again, Andy, we were talking earlier about coyotes. There aren't coyotes in Maryland, are there?
There are absolutely coyotes in Maryland. They're one of the larger predators that we have around here. And for as big as they are very hard to see. We have them not just in Hartford County, but throughout the state and throughout the East Coast, actually. And they run around. They usually eat small mammals and birds. And sometimes, if you're lucky enough, you can hear them talking at night. So
is that the kind of thing where watch out putting the dog out backyard?
I mean, potentially with anything, but they mostly stick to, again, small mammals. They really don't like to be around people too much.
And that's why we don't see them?
And yeah, they tend to be very secretive in their lifestyle.
So the media have made them a little more sinister than they really are.
100%. Yeah.
Might be some Western farmers in the United States who might tell us otherwise, but
yeah, definitely.
Is that because there are larger groups of them out there?
Yeah, so they are found out in the western part of the United States. But the coyotes actually have a pretty long story of how they got here. The eastern coyote, which actually used to be here, hundreds of years ago, is no longer here, and the coyote that is here is something a little different, migrating over from the western United States and Canada, have since made their home here and established themselves back into the ecosystem.
Interesting. We're talking with the Susquehannock Wildlife Society. Scott McDaniel, the executive director, Andy Adams, the president of the Susquehannock Wildlife Society, who can easily be found at Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, as much as they may want you outside. And you guys have won a pretty nifty award. You've only been in existence for roughly 7 years. Good for you. And you're already the Maryland Conservationist of the Year for 2017 into 18. Congratulations.
Yes, thank you. We're really honored to receive this award from the Maryland Department of Natural Resources. It's one of our most valued partnerships that we have. They are actually the owners of the property where our wildlife center is being built. And we work with them on research projects. We try to volunteer for them as much as possible with advising different issues on wildlife in the state. We've gone out and actually done surveys on rare and endangered species like the bog turtle that is found here in Hartford County. and other species, terrapins out in the Chesapeake Bay and other things. And we rely on them for permits and advice and guidance on many of our wildlife issues. And we're really happy to receive an award like this because it shows that our hard work is being noticed. We're a small group, but we feel we're very effective and we are able to do the work of a much larger group thanks to the dedication of our volunteers.
Yeah, in case somebody might be asking, so what the heck is a Susquehannock Wildlife Society? The kinds of things you do, you're a 501c3 organization, you're a nonprofit, that's why a lot of volunteers and a part-time are running the show here. You've produced a series of short wildlife documentary videos. You've appeared as guest speakers at lots and lots of events. You led dozens of trips, seen the bald eagles and the breeding salamanders. Conducted the survey, you mentioned the reptile and amphibian populations in Harford County. You've collected data on mammal distributions around the area. I always like saying this one. We talked about it last time you were around. Searching for the Eastern Hellbender using environmental DNA techniques. You know, you're going to find some of them here at Harford Community College, but I have a feeling that's a different breed. You restored Baltimore checker spot butterfly habitat. You've monitored the populations of the turtles you mentioned earlier, Scott. And much of this being done by a bunch of volunteers who help keep the Susquehannock Wildlife Society going. So congratulations on being Conservationists of the Year. How many people work for the society?
Just me.
Right, so, as an employee. But in terms of volunteers?
Volunteers, it varies depending on the events and the time of year, but we have a couple dozen volunteers that are very active, and they are willing to paint, to cut thorn bushes down, to go on and do research on things like the copperhead that we're doing a research project on right now. They will do pretty much anything we ask of them because they really do truly love wildlife and they really are trying to make a difference. And it's amazing to see people that are willing to give up their free time and put their energy into something like this. We believe in it, but it means a lot more when other people come to us and they say, hey, I want to help you guys and I want to get involved. And then they show up time and time again to give up their precious free time to help wildlife. And
as much as it would be nice for people to go outside and take in the wildlife, they can also go online and find a way to plug in with you. That's susquehannockwildlife.org. And those of you who might be spelling disadvantaged when it comes to Susquehannock, it's Susque, just like the river, S-U-S-Q-U-E, and then Hannock, H-A-N-N-O-C-K, wildlife.org. And if you go there, you can find out how you might plug in. But I think the important message that we get across in an interview like this is that there are things people can do and enjoy, whether they're volunteering or not. And it's not just a nicey nice organization that sounds good and wins awards, right? So we're talking about this wildlife center you guys also have going on. Andy, can you fill us on what's going on there?
So at our wildlife center, based up in Darlington, we have about 20 acres that is actually owned by the Department of Natural Resources, but we're going to be the ones managing it. So like we covered before, we have fenced off sensitive areas. We're starting to make hiking trails. We have campfire circles on the stargazing platform, of course, and an outdoor movie theater. But the centerpiece is going to be, there's a building on site where hopefully we'll be in the process of turning that into a full-fledged nature center, wildlife center with museum-grade displays and live animals and just a really great way to connect people and educate people with their local wildlife.
And as we record in early 2018, when do you hope to get all this going?
It's all based on fundraising. We hope as soon as possible. We just recently finished renovation for an outdoor classroom in our barn, and the next project now is to establish a lab and educational space, so hopefully within the next year or two.
So 2019-ish.
Sure.
So in that ballpark. And again, if someone's interested in helping out, worthwhile cause, they can go to susquehannockwildlife.org and they can pitch in if they like. So that's the Wildlife Center, and you've got the platform going on as well. But I noticed when I went through some of the events on your website, we've got some owls to talk about. One is a Night with the Wild, in which you've got an owl pictured on your website, but that's coming the end of April in 2018. That's going to be up at the Deer Creek Overlook. This is the third time around for this. How does it go when you show up for a Night with the Wild?
So this is kind of our premium event of the year to help raise money for the Wildlife Center. So you really can be a part of this effort from the ground up. And as a nonprofit, we rely on the funding by the community, so the investment of the community in our organization. This event is really fun. It's not only a fundraiser. It has live animals. We have a gentleman brings live owls to show people. They can actually look at them, get photos with them. We bring some reptiles, snakes, snapping turtles, things like that. People will be able to get photos with, take a look at up close. So we want we're always educating. We can't even have a fundraiser without educating people about wildlife. But, at the same time, we have silent auctions and really good food and drinks. It's a 21 and over event. So we have, dancing, we have a DJ. So it's kind of your standard event, but we put our twist on it. So we have it as a night with the wild because we highlight nocturnal animals in this event since it's at night. And that's kind of what we bring to the table to make it a little different. So you have a good time, you get some nice photos, you see some wildlife, and we talk about our mission and let you be a part of this wildlife center in our organization at its beginning stages.
That could use some help at this point. This is Saturday, April 28th. That's 7 p.m. at Deer Creek Overlook in Street, Maryland. Saturday, April 28th for the Night with the Wild fundraiser, food, drinks, music, raffles, auction, wildlife, etc. Could I dance with a llama if I showed up?
Llamas aren't native, so we only focus on native species. Tickets will be going on sale soon. We haven't announced the date yet, but
I think you ducked out on that question, frankly, Scott. I think
you can dance with a snapping turtle.
You can come dressed as a llama. We can't prevent you from dressing what you want to dress as.
So the llama might get there one way or the other, and
that's up to you.
If I were wise, I'd wear a mask. Yeah, okay. You can find these gentlemen on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. They are the Susquehannock Wildlife Society representatives today. Scott McDaniel, the executive director, and Andy Adams, the president and professor of biology at Hartford Community College. I'm moving on because you've got some other events too, Andy, that you and I were talking about off air earlier. What else is going on with the Susquehannock Wildlife Society?
So we usually have a bunch of spring events going on, mostly educational in nature. We do have an annual amphibian walk that we have at one of the local parks here in Hartford County that has yet to be scheduled, but usually right when it starts to get a little warmer and we start to get the first warm spring rains, all of the frogs and salamanders will start to come out of hibernation and make their way into their breeding pools. And it really is a spectacle that a lot of people don't get to experience. So we do have a hike that we take people out and they can see and hold salamanders and frogs that are going to be making their annual migrations.
It seems sudden every spring when it happens. Or if you come through a warm winter day even, where suddenly it's 60, shouldn't be, and there's a moth flying around. You're the biologist of this troop here, Andy. How is that suddenly weather turns and it's not like the critters have to go, oh, let's make the rounds and wake people up? Now they're ready. They're just there instantly. It just seems to happen that way.
Sometimes it does throw them off, but they generally are very prepared for this sort of thing. I mean, we just had a warm spell the other week in the middle of winter, and some amphibians were active, but they do tolerate cold to a certain extent, and they usually will make their way back down into their hibernacula and will stay there until that next warm spell comes out.
Is there harm that's done to a species when the weather does sudden turns?
Sometimes. And it depends on the species. Amphibians tend to be pretty hardy. Once in a while, a reptile will come out, and unfortunately, they don't deal with the cold very well. Sometimes plants will start to bloom earlier or later, depending on what species. So alterations in weather and climate could throw them off.
Scott, we were talking off air about the snowy owls, which I would presume would kind of come with snow. So winter season seems to be their thing, and you got some information online also about how Street cited a couple of snowy owls in Hartford County. So fill us in.
Yeah, there's been at least 2, maybe more, snowy owls sighted in Hartford County in the last few months. We're in what they call an eruption year, which means that there's an influx of snowy owls that come down from the Arctic. They're typically found in Canada and Alaska, in the northern reaches where you potentially find polar bears. You'd also have snowy owls, but they come down when they have really good years where they breed a lot and there's too many of them and there's not enough food. They prey on things like lemmings up in the Arctic areas. And when it gets really cold, it's harder to find food. They start coming further south where there's less snow. And this year we're lucky to have a couple show up in Hartford County. One of the things is they attract a lot of people. They're really beautiful. They're almost mystical in the way that they just kind of stand out in the landscape here. But it's one of those things that people also can love to death. A lot of photographers want to get the closest picture possible. And we've had a lot of instances of people chasing after the birds, spooking them to get them to fly so they can get a different kind of shot, trespassing on private property, things like that. So, and ruining it for others, because once you scare the owl enough times, it's going to move on somewhere else. So as a wildlife group, we're here to protect wildlife. So we want people to enjoy them, learn about them, but also respect them. These owls travel a really long way. They're stressed out. They're trying to find food. They need as much energy as they can reserve. So chasing them, scaring them, getting too close to them are just things that are really inappropriate, and we're trying to steer people away from that. And we'll be releasing a video shortly in the next week or so about the owls with some really cool footage that people can see some of the owls that we've actually found in Hartford County doing some cool things and flying around and just looking beautiful like they do. So
yeah, SusquehannockWildlife.org, the place where you can see those. And I would imagine those owls do stand out because if they're white and you've got woods with no leaves or color, right, these guys must be quite something in all of their glory.
They are. And they blend into the snow on a couple snowy days we've had, but they do stand out a lot. And they tend to be more diurnal, so you see them more during the day than other owls that kind of tuck back into the forest and the trees. These owls will often sit on a man-made structure on the ground. So the way that they're seen is often different. That's why people are able to find them a little easier than other owls, which may even be hiding in a little hole in a tree or deep into the forest up in the canopy. So owls are all around us. We have several species that are native to here, but because of their nocturnal habits, they're rarely seen.
We've been fooled by many a plastic grocery bag in a farm field, for sure.
So you go running and chasing a piece of plastic and then feel silly, I guess.
Yep, and we never speak of it again.
And we had 2 rescues of owls in recent months. At the end of 2017, Andy rescued one off of I-95, and we had another that was hit by a local resident that was a screech owl that was rescued and taken to Chadwell Animal Hospital and off to a wildlife rehabilitator. That's something else that we do, is we actually do hands-on rescues of wildlife in need. People call our hotline, and we respond that way.
You guys are busy.
Very
When you
busy.
say hit, you mean struck by a vehicle, I presume?
Yes,
Okay.
correct.
Yeah, always sad.
It is.
Right. Let's talk a little broader topic here, gentlemen, since I've got the right people in the room. Scott McDaniel, Executive Director for the Susquehannock Wildlife Society, and the President, Andy Adams, also a Professor of Biology at Hartford Community College. How is wildlife doing? I mean, that's a broad question, but it's 2018, 19, right? We're well into the 21st century, and we're hearing all kinds of things about climate. So, Andy, I'll turn to you. If you were to get asked that question and say, so, Mr. Biologist, how's it going? What would you say about wildlife these days?
Wildlife does experience a lot of trouble in a lot of places, and unfortunately most of it is human caused. I would say probably one of the number one threats to wildlife is actually habitat loss as humans expand and develop areas, which of course we're not against. I mean, people need to develop and move to new places as well, but it does sometimes encroach on their habitat and push them out of where they would be naturally. And then you also have things like climate change and pollution and sometimes even poaching for some rare species, people trying to collect animals there. They have a lot going against them.
Are there any particular species, and I'll come back to you, Scott, here, that are in danger in Maryland?
Yeah, we actually have quite a few that some people may not be aware about. We actually have a federally threatened species here in Hartford County called the bog turtle, and it's pretty rare. It's actually America's smallest turtle, and they are very, very specific where they like to live, and that habitat is dwindling. So we don't see them as often. Department of Natural Resources does monitor them, but they are definitely susceptible to habitat loss and poaching as well.
Right, so here we are, the land of the terrapin, which is not the same as a bog turtle, but here's a turtle threatened in Maryland. It seems kind of ironic. Scott?
Yes, we also have the Baltimore checkerspot butterfly, which is the state insect, and the terrapin is the state reptile. Our state insect is being pushed further north, in part because of climate change and habitat loss. And actually deer, which are thriving, so as you said, how are wildlife doing? That question is actually, well, it depends. Invasive species tend to be doing really well. A lot of plants and animals that have been introduced. The most common bird you'll probably see outside is a European starling, which is a non-native species that has taken over much of the landscape, as of some native species like deer are thriving because they actually prefer the broken up, fragmented habitat that we've created for them. And they've also lost most of their natural hunters and predators besides humans. So wolves, cougars, things like that can take down a deer are gone from our landscape in the east. But you have, humans trying to manage their populations, but they'll never do as good a job as the natural predators would have done.
Yeah, well, my wife in her garden would sure like to see a few deers go somewhere else, so.
Yeah, so like with the deer, they actually eat the host plant of the Baltimore checkerspot butterfly. So because deer are overpopulated, they're actually destroying the plant required for the life cycle of the Baltimore checkerspot butterfly. Part of the reason we're trying to restore their habitat on our property and provide a place for those plants to grow, therefore helping the butterfly and keeping the deer away from those plants as best as we can.
I'm guessing a checker spot is spotted?
It is.
What does it look like?
So the Baltimore checkerspot butterfly has the crest of Lord Baltimore. So just like the Baltimore Oriole was named, not because it was found in Baltimore, but because it had the colors, the orange and black colors that the Baltimore family.
So is where all that comes from is the butterfly? That's why we've got flags with yellow, black, and red?
I think it was the other way around.
The other way around.
Yeah,
okay.
Well, maybe he was inspired, but I think they probably came overseas with those colors for their family. But I'm not a historian, though. But
right. But my point was it's not a butterfly that inspired the flag?
Not that I know of. I think it was the other way around, and the butterfly shared the colors, so they assigned the name to it based on that.
Interesting.
And there are more cold weather species found in New England and the Appalachians, so we do have them here still in the area, but they seem to be moving further north as time goes on. So Maryland may one day lose its state insect if things are not done and their habitat is not protected. They may lose those areas where they still are found.
Is there any more significance to a creature being designated as a state something than it is the state something?
I would say no, other than it brings more awareness and education around the animal. They do not necessarily afford greater protection. I mean, you have the blue crab, the Baltimore Oriole. They don't receive special protection based on their state status, but it does include kind of a sense of pride behind the animal, I think. And that's why we like those state designations. Pennsylvania is trying to designate the hellbender as their state salamander. There's some controversy around that. There's a battle between different salamander species to be designated in Pennsylvania.
Really?
Sometimes people feel very strongly about what symbol is going to be representing their state, and we actually have a bunch in Maryland. And that's how I would think of the state designations are more of symbols of the Maryland culture and history. So like the terrapin has been a big part of our natural history for a while. So like Scott said, it's more of a sense of pride.
Interesting. And the hellbender makes its way across a few states that salamander does. So we're heading down the home stretch here on Feedback. I'm Wayne Hepler with Scott McDaniel, the executive director, and Andy Adams, the president of the Susquehannock Wildlife Society. Are there any comebacks going on in nature that we can point to and say, well, here's a success story or two, and maybe locally, or is it elsewhere?
There have been a lot of success stories, actually, and a good local example, maybe not too recently, but the bald eagle was once on the endangered species list as a result of DDT and habitat loss. If you didn't know, DDT is a pesticide that was used pretty heavily back in the 50s that impacted a lot of bird populations. But through rigorous breeding programs, they've been able to bring the bald eagle back, and I think by the year 2000 it was removed from the endangered species list. And I know now I can't go a day without seeing a bald eagle flying overhead, if you just look up. Other similar birds of prey like the peregrine falcon were under the same type of stress and they were brought back. The brown pelican are all great success stories here locally.
Yeah, good for Maryland.
Great for Maryland.
Unfortunately, turtles are one of those ones that they're mostly on decline. Seem like birds have really come back a lot. A lot of mammals have come back, been reintroduced. River otters are one that their range has expanded again. They've been reintroduced in areas that they were missing from, like Western Maryland. But reptiles and turtles just seem, the way that their life cycle works, their eggs get preyed on by raccoons and things like that, rodents, they'd have a lot stacked against them, which is one of the reasons we focus a lot on turtles, because they have so many threats against them.
Well, we've been talking to the Conservationists of the Year. Congratulations to the Susquehannock Wildlife Society. With the scenic overlook to come and the Wildlife Center as well, and the fundraiser April 28th up in Street at the Deer Creek Overlook, we wish you well, Scott and Andy, and thank you very much for coming on Feedback.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks very much.
Feedback is a production of WHFC and is recorded on the campus of Harford Community College in Bel Air, Maryland. Feedback is produced by Justin McAllister. I'm Wayne Hepler, and we'll look for you on the next Feedback next week.